when somebody tells me no, I can't do something, like I take a deep breath and my chest puffs up and I'm even doing it now when I'm talking to you. And my shoulders drop back and I'm like, watch me.
This is Therapist Clubhouse, a podcast for private practice entrepreneurs. I'm Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Amy Lasseter, a private practice entrepreneur in Athens, Georgia. Listen as she talks about business mindset, her experiences with running a group practice, and how she got off of insurance panels. Welcome, Amy. I'm so glad to have you here.
I am super excited to be here. It's so nice to see you in person.
So I want to talk to you about your entrepreneurial journey. You're a consultant for therapists in private practice, and you're also a therapist, of course. So can you tell us about your private practice, starting with who you like to see?
So I always worked with moms. I love moms. But one of the things that I really started noticing over the last 2 years, 18 months or so, is that I've been having a lot of fun when my caseload really started drawing in mothers who were aspiring entrepreneurs.
Ooh.
Or business leaders or women who were in leadership roles, and just kind of talking about what that takes and what that requires of us and how much that really brings up our stuff, and helping them dive into that, more of that business side, and how our personal life and our personality traits and our triggers and the things that we want to shrink back from and shy away from really start showing up in our business side.
Yes.
And so that's when I was like, oh, maybe I need to start doing some refocusing, because this is really fun. I'm really enjoying the blend.
We've talked once about how I think you said there are two things that can bring up all of your stuff and challenge you to the core: owning a business and being a parent. So you obviously really get that. And then it makes sense to me that you're drawn to work with people who are also in both of those struggles. What's something that owning a business has brought up for you to deal with and grow from?
Just one?
Doesn't have to be just one.
Right. Confidence. Learning how I feel like I'm really becoming skilled at living in the messy middle and still moving forward. A lot of times when things would get messy, I would just kind of wait for things to settle and then start making movement forward. But that's also when we have a tendency to get stuck in our life and when we get stuck in our business. So I've really learned how to cultivate forward movement while we stay in the mess. And It's almost like cleaning up after yourself. And a lot of that's been really good for me, because it's really forced me to sit with, and I continue to have to sit with, the voices of too much and never enough. I'm never going to be enough to do this. So, how do I can't ask for that. And then it turns into, well, if I ask for that, then it's too much. I was actually just in a mastermind call with my mastermind sisters, and we were talking about voices of too much and never enough, and how do we battle those and how do we move through those? And it's, it comes up in different ways and different layers at different times for different reasons.
Yeah. How does, what's a way that too much comes up?
For me, too much definitely comes up when I'm talking about finances and when I'm talking about money. I was going through some money mindset work with a mentor of mine, and, I was doing some work and creating the worksheet, versus your what you live by budget and what your dream budget is. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm 6 clients away from my dream budget. I can totally get there.
Yeah.
And then you end up in those periods where you're like, you know what? I feel good about my pricing. I feel good about where I'm sitting. And then a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. And it's like, oh my gosh, the phone isn't ringing. Maybe I'm asking too much.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Maybe I should lower my prices. And it's stop.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. I think that happens to all of us. We make a change, and then if just reality doesn't give us what we were expecting or hoping for. It's like, oh, nope, that was wrong. And sometimes it's just like, stay the course, give it some time, wait and see, trust yourself.
Absolutely. I think what the universe is absolutely trying to get my attention on is to slow down, be patient. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on this.
I've got that too. I've definitely got a lot of impatience. And I think it probably works in our favor sometimes as entrepreneurs because we get to make decisions quickly. We get to try new things. And I feel like you and I both probably lean into that, which is great. But then it makes it hard to just stay the course for a while, to just let things happen.
Yeah. What I've come to realize over, the last several months is really that I have a tendency, this is kind of funny. My husband would totally be like, yeah, it's so true. Is that when somebody tells me no, I can't do something, like I take a deep breath and my chest puffs up and I'm even doing it now when I'm talking to you. And my shoulders drop back and I'm like, watch me.
Ooh, that's good.
It is. And I have to be careful. I try not to be so careful. I have to be thoughtful about making sure that it's not because I have to prove something.
Yes.
And that it's not the voice of never enough. Well, watch me. I am enough. And it's like, pause. What's around that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so I have to be, I'm still learning how to really sink in and listen to if that's my instinct sticking in, because it's like, no, I know that this is true on a very deep level, or is that my too much or never enough talking?
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I know you're really into mindset stuff, and so am I. I have an exercise that I do myself and I teach, which is about finding your inner guide, which you can think of as, just a way to get in touch with your wiser self. That it's an exercise to just access that part of you. And then I like to use that guide or that wiser part of me and run difficult decisions by her and look at what she has to say, even though I know it's me and it's part of me. And that's one way that I like to figure out, is this my stuff that's guiding this decision, or is this really what I need to be doing?
Yep, that's a lot of it. Also understanding that, just because I don't like it, does that mean it's not true? Mm-hmm. Because I don't like it, does it mean it's true? And those are the questions that I try to ask myself. What is it that's calling me to this? Mm-hmm. And I love that you talk about, that higher self, that wiser self, because I think that's such a critical piece, for moms and for business owners and, therapists, because we are making decisions all day long.
Yeah.
And then we start running burnout and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of big decisions, you used to run a group practice. I used to run a group practice just until the summer. And I'm wondering for you, what were the best things and the hardest things about running a group practice? Or what are the things, when you look back on it that you feel like, oh, I miss that, or I don't miss that?
I think some of what I miss is the camaraderie. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting as I've been transitioning into this new phase of my life, is that it's also been really interesting because it's also brought some really wonderful people in. Mm. I miss the camaraderie, but what I'm also starting to realize in its place, that I'm also on some level starting to find a deeper camaraderie in a new way. And so that's been really interesting. So, those are the things that have been really, really good and, really, really hard. It's felt really good to me personally. I feel more at ease when I'm home with my family and my kids. I feel more relaxed. Mm-hmm. And it was really hard to get here because it also meant of working through a new level or a different level of the voices of too much and never enough, and having to sit with the fact that people are, that people are going to be unhappy and that people are going to be disappointed and that I'm the disruptor. Because if I would just fall back in line and go back to the old way and say that these things are okay and that I can be okay with it, I wouldn't be the disruptor. And at the same time, there's a lot of power in being the disruptor. Yeah. And that's where that resiliency piece and that strengthening of confidence comes back too. So,
and I can really relate to this thing that you just said about feeling like the hard thing about running a group practice, and I think it's important for people to know this if they're thinking of stepping into adding clinicians to their practice. The hard part, I think for me too, was the holding the group practice when I wasn't in it, like holding it at all times. And the people I was working with were awesome. Like there was nothing that I was holding that was bad. And for me, there wasn't ever anything in it that I was like, this isn't working for me. This is bad. So for me, it was more like leaving, changing things and handing it over to someone else because it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing then. Yeah. And so I also felt like because it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, I did feel some relief too of just like breathing a little deeper. Mm-hmm. And yeah, sometimes we have to pivot when things aren't bad. Like we just have to pivot because we need to go in a different direction.
Yeah. And that, it's so interesting that you talk about that because somebody was asking me, I think that this is an important topic to talk about. So I'm really glad that we're talking about it because I have been getting a lot of inquiries and just kind of, I do free consultation calls and people have been like, so, tell me about the group practice. Why didn't it work? What was good about it? What was bad about it? And what was hard? And it's one of those things where it's like, there are a lot of hard things about it. It's a lot to hold. And yet at the same time, like, I was like, well, when you look at all my spinning plates in the air and all of the balls in the air, it's not that it wasn't bringing me some satisfaction or joy or happiness on some level. But when I look at all of them, it wasn't the one that was bringing or that called to me the most or that brought me the most joy. And it doesn't, and that somehow implies somewhere in there that like somehow it wasn't enjoyable. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
It just happened to be the one that was calling me the least.
It makes sense to me. Yeah. And I want to say like, in case somebody's listening, this is like their first episode and they're like, wow, it sounds like group practice is a bad idea. Like it's not. I help therapists who have group practices and it's great for them. I think you and I both have other things that we're putting a ton of energy into. And so I think that's part of probably why it's not what we're doing right now.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, there's, I suspect you would say like, I would never go back and change it.
Nope,
because I learned so much. It was so great. And yet and that kind of gets in, right? And that's sometimes where we can even get into the voices of too much and not enough again, because it's like, I have this great thing. Why would I want to leave it? I'm asking for too much.
Oh yeah. That's so true, Amy. Yeah. Like how can you let go of something that's like profitable and good and feels collaborative? And well, because life is really short and you've got to go in the direction that is calling you the most.
Yeah. I was emailing with somebody else this morning and they were like, oh, this is kind of what I found and why I didn't start a group practice. Was that true for you? And they were talking about the profitability of it. And I was like, to be honest, like it was a rare month where I maybe made like $200. But that's because of the infrastructure and the way that I structured the business. So that's one of the things that I really like to, when people talk to me about like adding clinicians or doing that infrastructure stuff, I really always try to encourage them to make sure that when you're building the infrastructure, you're not building it as a clinician, you're building it with a business mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they're two very different things. And, and that was one of the other things that, came out for me in my own process is that, I built the infrastructure of the business with the clinician mindset. And so what I did is I'm like, oh, well, I was really successful at my goal, which was to make it a really easy yes for good clinicians to come back in the field. Like that was the purpose and that was the goal of the company. The goal of the company was never to make money. But then as that business mindset really started developing and strengthening. And when I looked at all of the hours that I was putting in and all of like the behind the scenes work that I was putting in, it was like, wow, like I'm not sure that that's really paying off. And then when I look at the alignment of those two of like, well, what do I need to take this company to the next level? I'm like, I'm pulling out of alignment with the whole purpose of the company. That was another level for me that I had to just, sit with and work through. Transitions, they'll do that to you.
Absolutely. And I know you went through the transition of getting off of insurance panels and moving to private pay. And that is something that I know so many therapists who are in the middle of. When did you do that and how did you do it?
So I started the process, actually, it was probably just over a year ago this month. Mm-hmm. It was a really hard decision because, again, like I'm working through those voices of, you can't ask for cash. It's too much. What about the people? What about people need theirs? We can go all day around that.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised at how long it took me to get off the panels.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody today and they're like, oh my gosh, it took me 4 months to get off Blue Cross Blue Shield. I was like, it took me 3. Mm-hmm. And by the end of December, I was literally emailing the rep every single week. And I was super friendly. I was like, hey, hope you're having a great Friday. Just wanted to check and see if you guys have, ended my contract yet. Hope the kids are well. Because we were just emailing so much. So it was really hard and it's been really rewarding. And I absolutely share that with people. When people are just starting out in practice, one of the things that I wish I would have put a little more thought into is looking at who your really big carriers in your area and looking at who your really small carriers are in your area. Mm-hmm. And either going with your big carrier and just being like, that's the one panel, like that's all I need, or saying go with 1 or 2 smaller carriers. So that way, I don't want to say there's always a steady stream, but there's almost like a small base to operate from because usually the smaller panels are harder to find clinicians that are paneled with them, at least in our area. And then just like kind of setting your cash rate. I sometimes get curious what would have happened if I would have kept, 1 or 2 of the smaller panels. But that's just not what I did. And I don't think that I would go back. It's just a matter of getting, like we talked about, right, being patient and kind of moving into that new realm, because I also think that building a cash business is different than building an insurance-based business.
Yeah.
And so that's been a mindset shift that I've been in transition with, just because it's a different perspective. It's just a different mentality.
Absolutely. And I've never taken insurance, but I've definitely helped a lot of therapists get off of insurance. And so whenever people ask me, like, should I get on panels or not? I don't tell them no. There are good reasons to do it. And my favorite reason to do it is that you want people to be able to use their insurance and you feel called to do that. But I do always share with them how many people I help get off of panels.
I love that you talked about that. And I was like, we should have a side conversation about like mindset stuff around cash based. Mm-hmm. I'll need to set up a consulting call later. I'm sorry. I'm a firm believer that consultants need consultants.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found really interesting as I moved through that process is how much that money mindset work, how much allowing and staying on insurance panels, how much it really, I was allowing somebody else to determine my worth.
Oh, okay.
And the value of my time. Nobody should have that much power over my life except for me. Mm-hmm. And I will say my husband on some level and my kids on some level.
Yeah.
But it was just a very interesting process to me to kind of walk and wade through that. Because I mean, essentially like that's what I'm doing. And when I allow that to happen, I give up my power to somebody else, and then I get frustrated because I'm not able to do the things that I want to do, but yet I gave up that power when I signed that contract. That's been a really interesting experience for me. And I think that is something that I would really encourage people to think about, when they're getting ready to sign those contracts and just say, yeah, well, you can pay me $55 a session.
Right. Really think about it. About it. What do you charge in your practice?
Oh, you're going to ask the big question. Okay. Starting January 1st, I am charging $150 an hour. Mm-hmm. And I'm adding a couple of new services. And I am going to test market concierge service, where I will come and drive to you. And I'm going to be charging or offering it at $300.
Cool.
What I've noticed too, especially in women in leadership positions and those higher end positions, it kind of gets into this weird catch-22 of like, and I think that plays into the role too of what it's like to be a group. I'm just going to go with group leader because I was neither a boss, but I wasn't exactly a colleague either. Mm-hmm. So you're in that weird space. And it's like, I am struggling with all of this stuff. I don't really have anyone I can go to. And, part of that for us, at least in my area, is that I always joke, I'm like, we are the biggest small town ever. Everybody, it's like not 6 degrees of separation. It's like 3 people of separation. And it can be a really lonely place. So I was thinking about the concierge service in the sense of like, it kind of goes back to, you can tell people whoever you want me to be, like I can just be somebody that is coming to you for consulting services or whatever, or I'm your friend, whatever, versus you walking into my office and like, oh, you're going to therapy. So it felt like to me that it would offer another layer of confidentiality and hopefully make things easier for people to reach to and reach for, because I also feel like when you're in those bigger leadership positions, you've got a lot of demands placed on you.
That's right.
A lot of demands. And so that makes your time incredibly small and valuable. And you're talking about driving somewhere. I'm like, that's another 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes here and there, like there and back. I'm like, so that's another 40 minutes that you've just lost.
Absolutely.
So those are the services I'm trying, along with walking therapy.
Oh, cool.
I know. I'm very excited. I'm getting really good feedback about that one.
And if you could time travel to the start of your private practice, what's one thing that you would tell the Amy of that time?
That is a really good question. You've got this. Mm-hmm. You've got it. I know you're sweating it. I know that you're freaking out about it. You've got this.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the listener question, you willing to tackle this with me?
Absolutely.
Listener question.
How do you know if you're ready to expand to a group practice?
Oh, there's so many. So many.
Yeah.
So many layers to that. I think some of it is knowing your strengths. Mm-hmm. You've got to know what you're good at. When you have to be really honest with yourself about what you're not good at. And you have to know how you're going to, I always call it checking your blind spot. Mm-hmm. So if you know that you're not good at something, how are you going to get the support for that? And I always like to use blind spot too, because so many times our greatest strengths can also become our greatest weaknesses.
Absolutely.
So I always like to paint the picture or the idea of like somebody's there, like to tap you on the shoulder and just like, hey, did you see that back there? Because you totally missed it. So yeah, just knowing who it is that's going to help you check your blind spots, knowing who your support circle is going to be, and really making sure that's firm and established, and that there are people who see all of you, not just a part of you, and that you're comfortable with showing all of yourself too. Because there's that idea of perfectionism, and that somebody just asked me, like, well, what are your thoughts about being a leader? I'm like, well, a leader knows what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Oh, but you can't know what you're doing if you're going into the unknown or the wilderness, right? That's what Brene Brown always talks about. And I think just being able to sit with uncomfortable feedback.
Yeah. And then I would say also, like, on a nitty gritty level, you're probably not ready if you don't have enough clients yourself, or if you're struggling with the marketing side. So you've got to have enough clients and then some, at least some of the time. And there's a ton, I mean, you and I know this, like, there's a ton to learn, but make sure it's the right fit for you first. And part of knowing that, I think, is, do you love interacting? And have you been a manager before? Like, do you know what that's about? And if not, if you're super excited, that's a great sign. If you're thinking, this will be a good way to make more money, that's not a good sign. Mm-hmm. So you've got to love the idea of it. And then even if you don't have management experience, just start small. And then you'll see what you like about it, what you don't like about it.
Yep. And actually, I suspect for you too, that's probably one of the ways that you started. I was getting so many referrals and I had so much guilt about turning them down. I was like, I need to bring on somebody else.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think, it's such a combination.
So Amy, what's the best place for therapists to find you and throw compliments at you?
The best place is, I actually have unintentionally started a bite-sized podcast on Anchor.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amy. This is a blast.
Yes, I love chatting with you, and I love the work, and I love the way that you just so genuinely show up in the world. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Here's a question to chew on.
Question to chew on.
This is part 1 of a 2-parter. I'll give you the second part next week. I recently heard this question from Brianne Dick of MNIB Consulting. I know I've heard it before, but I don't remember where. Picture yourself 6 months from now and ask yourself, what will I wish I had started working on now? Next week, I'll tell you what to do with this information, but right now, just start thinking about it and write it down. So when I did this exercise, asking myself, 6 months from now, what am I going to wish I had started working on? I came up with a bunch of areas I know I'll want to have made progress with. I'm really curious what you'll come up with. Go to the show notes at coachingwithannie.com/podcast and look for this episode with Amy Lasseter. And let us know in the comments. We would love to know what you come up with. Thanks for listening to Therapist Clubhouse. I want you to feel more financial ease. Part of that is bringing in more clients if your practice isn't full, but part of it is having a really good system for setting your fees. Grab my step-by-step system with a video and worksheet including exactly how to set your fees, and you'll get an exercise to help you with the mindset part of this, because even if you have the right fee, sometimes it's hard to say it out loud. So go to coachingwithannie.com/set-your-fees. That's coachingwithannie.com/set-your-fees. Or if you can't write that down right now, you can also grab that at the show notes for this episode. I'll see you next week.